Three guys, many games. Week 3 wrap-up edition. Big week in lacrosse, guys. I'm Steve Sombrato. I'm here with my dear brother, Vince Sombrato. And for week 3, we had to bring in the Syracuse legend, Pat McCabe, because it was such a great week for Syracuse. Let's get a little Syracuse cheer going. Welcome back, Pat. How you doing?
Sorry, I'm just doing something quick. I'm in a hotel and I had to put my do not disturb because the housekeeping is in the room next door. My apologies.
Nice. How we doing?
I'm doing all right. How's everybody going? How's everything?
So is everybody feeling better in Orange Land? You know, this is, one of the things we want to talk about is obviously major games early in the year. How much do they matter? Maryland, number 1 team in the country, travels up to Syracuse. Big test, great game. And Syracuse, I think, definitely showed that they're in business to really contend, not only to go deep in May, but really to potentially win this thing for the first time in a very long time.
I think that's true. I mean, obviously Maryland's very good, but early in the season, 2 heavyweights, legitimate game. I don't see any tremendous advantages for either one other than the score. So if you look at that game, do we want to start picking it apart right away? There are things in that game that I think Syracuse took advantage of Maryland mistakes much more than Maryland took advantage of Syracuse mistakes. I think there were matchup situations that Syracuse was able to identify and go after, and I don't think that Maryland was able to do that as much. I also don't think that Syracuse made as many mistakes defensively as Maryland did. So those little things in that particular game, I think, swayed it a little bit. You'll see these two teams, for the remainder of the year be in the conversation.
Vin, when I was watching the game, the thing that I may have been most impressed about, and I got to credit the coach Oderna, the defense for Syracuse, it looked like they had a specific strategy to really extend out on people, cutting off like the adjacents to some extent, and not let Maryland get into this where Maryland usually, they draw some attention and they really start spinning that ball around, and they get your head spinning to where they get wide open looks, 3, 4, 5 passes away. It seemed like Syracuse was extending to a point where those passes were getting cut off, and they were relying on beat us, have the first guy beat us. And while they gave up some one-on-one goals, overall, they pretty much held down a lot of the scoring that comes from multiple passes.
Yeah, I thought that they were very aggressive, like you said, extending out a little bit. But what really impressed me was their ability to slide and recover. They never left a guy on an island. Once in a while it happened. I know that guy made that crazy 360 shot the one time he spun around from coming from behind. But for the most part, every time a guy looked like an offensive player had leverage, like he was going to beat the guy, there was somebody coming in his face, and the second slide was there. So I thought that Syracuse was very connected defensively, very aggressive, and just whether that was their game plan or that's just their style of play, I just think that I've watched a lot of Syracuse games. I thought that was as good as they've done it in the past few years. So if they can keep that up, in terms of that kind of defense, and what they also did was they limited transition for Maryland. I don't remember many times where, Maryland broke out and had an uneven rush to the goal. They did a good job of that too. So yeah, I thought the offense did enough to win, but I thought that the defense was really what won the game for them.
Yeah, I mean it's early on, you always, I mean, to me, the game was a much better played game than you're expecting in February when the teams really haven't practiced all that much. But I want to ask you, Pat, like the aspect where there's so many new guys considering the way college is now and the transfers. And, Maryland is dealing with a team that has a lot of new faces, great faces, established players, 50-year guys. Does that hurt obviously earlier in the year where they got to just figure out where these guys best fit and how to play together, and maybe they'll show better later in the year? I mean, they don't get any rest because every week they're playing a killer. That schedule Maryland plays is crazy. But I guess what I'm asking is, they still played pretty well considering they have all of these new pieces and in a tough environment going up traveling in the Dome.
Yes, you got a lot of new pieces. The parts of that are important is, did they come to school in September or did they come in January? I think that's a question you have to know the answer to, right? So if they're with them in the fall, with mature guys, you're talking about 50-year guys, bright guys, and they're only going there to win, right? So all the ego stuff, all the individual stuff is already off the table that you might get with younger guys. So you're making that move to go to a contender because you want to win. So I think the buy-in is automatic. And I think John's very smart that way. We know him pretty well. They're so careful with what they bring in and who they bring in. So, they do tremendous research into these guys. They know everything they're dealing with. So I don't think there's any issue there as far as chemistry. I think that they spend enough time, I think, off the field. It's probably working itself out so that the on-the-field stuff, we know that. The closer you are off the field, you're always better on the field. The closer you are as friends. Mm-hmm. So that stuff matters, and I think they've got that right. I just, looking at that game, Steve, other than the Stovall kid, who does Maryland have that gets to the goal?
Well, I think those Yale guys, they're pretty crafty. They're experienced 50-year guys. I look at it more like the style of defense Syracuse was playing. It's almost like, I think for me as a player, when you get a goal where there's 3, 4, 5 guys involved in the play, it's more of an energy boost than the one guy who just makes a goal for you. And I think it translates better in overall offense. And so, them scoring a lot of those one-on-one goals was a little bit more uncharacteristic of Maryland. Because
well, I think to Vinny's point, I think that's probably the defensive strategy.
Right.
Make them Dodgers. Because I don't think it's their strong suit. So look, John O'Durness is a really good coach. I mean,
he really is.
Done some good things. He's been a head coach, so he understands the responsibility of that. I also think if you talk about the Syracuse staff, there's some smart guys there overall, and I think they're one of the things that makes them so smart is that they're willing to talk to each other. So I would bet you that it's not John O'Durness' defense and no one else communicates with him about, hey, this is working, this is not working. I think they're pretty collaborative that way. And, Gary's got insight into offense and defense that we've seen firsthand. Pat March is a smart offensive guy. So there's a wealth of information there. And, if you look at Maryland, they don't want to dodge you, right? So I think if that's their plan, and it looked like it was, make them beat us. And when that's really what they have to do, I think you played into their weakness. And I think the Syracuse strength is the on-ball stuff. Billy Dwan's a big, strong kid. I mean, they talked about on the telecast, Clark mentioned it a bunch of times, how they had, there's some injuries there on the defense, so they could probably even get better. But I think probably understanding the personnel they had there that day available, they played it just right.
And then with all of that said, it's still only a 2-goal game, which is, hotly contested late into the game. So, with all of that, obviously Maryland's going to get better, and then you're talking about maybe not playing in the dome. You're talking about playing outside and, different places, different venues, So I definitely would not sleep on Maryland anytime soon, just with the amount of talent that they have on their roster. John Tillman has been one of the best at being able to make those adjustments and finding out how to craft the best game plan for his team to be successful. There's no question about that.
I think he's picking the best game plan for that day with the information he has, which is probably not much, right? I mean, Syracuse played 2 games, but there's not a lot there to take from those 2 games. So I would draw a comparison to, going back to my time, 89. We go down, we play Hopkins, we lose by a goal. That game is almost a mirror image of the championship game in 89. So if you want to start to look at what's possible and, the exciting parts to this that could be down the road, could you see that matchup on Memorial Day weekend, on that Monday, and it'll play out fairly similar. Look at the stats. Face-off numbers were almost even. Save numbers were pretty close. Like, all the little things you measure. Now, granted, when you win a face-off is more important, I think, than how many you win. And when you make the save, as far as, how many you make, sometimes the timing of a save is bigger than 5 others. So that stuff does make a difference. But I think, this is a matchup. Look, it's February. Simi always said, it doesn't matter who's first in March, it's who's first in May. And I think that's obviously an antiquated statement because now they start in January.
Yeah.
So it's like ridiculous. You guys have talked about that a lot.
Well, maybe it should change. Maybe it should change to, it doesn't matter if you're 1 in January, it matters that you're 1 in June. Maybe we need to go to the Jays.
That could be. I know you've talked about it, and every Clark has his theories on it. That's a whole other conversation. I think you have to make some adjustments, though.
Well, when you just, we're talking about Maryland offensively, yeah, I think it's going to take a little more time for them to gel with the guys they have in the lineup. Also, one of their best players, that number 1, I mean, the guy clearly was playing on one leg. That was kind of tough. He gutted it out. He still scored a goal after he went down. Hopefully he can get healthy. They'll need that. They got a new goalie. They had a guy who played in goal for them for like 4 years. So that's a whole new ball game for them. And that guy was phenomenal, the goalie. Statistically, like you said, Pat, everything was close except, interestingly, the ground balls were lopsided in Syracuse's favor. It was like 36-22, something like that, And like you said, every face-off is not the same in importance. Same thing with a ground ball, coming up with different ground balls and that lead to goals. You also have that. But I want to ask you a question, as a former great playing in that dome. What do you think it's worth playing in that dome early in the year? Like, would you say, you're getting a 2 to 3 goal edge just playing at home?
We always thought so. The greatest moment for us was when the opposing team would walk in and the first thing they did was look up, right? To just see, like, it's different now. It's much brighter. If you remember, guys, like,
there's the contrast now. The seats were different.
That's exactly where I was going. So, like, the seats were all gray. The padding around the field was gray. Like, it was very easy. You used to see cross-field passes get lost, not in the lights, just lost. And that's not the case anymore. There's contrast, there's color, it's bright, the lighting is much better. So it's different, but even breathing in there is different. Like, it's a different type of breathing. It's a different type of sweat than you're getting outside, especially when, even though Maryland's down south, I mean, they've had, similar weather than we've had in New York. It's been cold there. So you go in a bubble maybe, but you still have to get on full fields. And then when you go in there, the dome it's different. Everything's different about it. And then there's a mystique factor. Simi would say all the time, it's the only covered lacrosse surface in the world. And it's a big deal. It's also a exciting factor for the Syracuse team because what most people don't realize is you don't really practice in there much. So you're practicing, they have the Ensley Center now, they have plenty of outdoor fields. But with basketball in season, and men's and women's both play there now. Women didn't always play there. So now you got twice as many basketball games. So even if you want to practice in there, you're going to get 50 or 60 yards. So you try not to practice in there as much as possible because you want to play up and down the field. So it's a big deal. Like when you get in there as a Syracuse player, it's exciting. It lights you up. And you hope it takes some air out of the other team because they're a little overwhelmed, especially goalies.
And they had a big crowd. They had 10,000. They had 10,000.
Yes. Well, if you watch the press conferences, Vin, that's what both Tillman and Gary talked about. And I think that's a credit to John because he's a Central New York guy. He's an upstate guy. It's, probably 3 days before that, they might have had a smaller crowd at a basketball game, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
There's a big controversy with that. But I was reading guys complaining about the ticket prices.
Really?
Yes. All over social media.
I saw $38 or something.
Yes, it's exactly what I saw. $38. They're complaining about it. Meanwhile, everyone's saying that there's 10 different ways to get a free ticket. Just take advantage of them. Don't complain. People want to. What people are on there. They got us talking about it.
Right. Wow. Well, I'll ask you this. I want to ask you about the field because I know that was, look, one of the things that I put up some posts and that was a bit controversial about the early games. And we're seeing a lot of games go inside and when the schedule starts and inside bubbles, the dome is a real field. I mean, there's nobody that's going to sit there and say that it's in, then it's, it's obviously inside. So it's different than playing, in an outdoor stadium, but it's probably the closest, it's obviously the closest thing to being outside on a real regular field with a lot of space in terms of that. And some of the other games that I watch, even if the dimensions of the turf is almost full regulation, maybe they shave a yard here and there, like whether it's at Marquette or Penn State or some of the other places we've seen these bubbles, they still seem a little, because there's no stands in there. I feel like as defensive guys, it always seems like it tightens up for the defense. I always feel like in those enclosed quarters, even without the stands, maybe makes the defense feel like they contract a little bit more than usual in those places and not really realize where they need to step out to a guy. Do you think there's a difference in some of those? I guess the question is the bubbles that don't have the stands and like the dome in that regard to playing?
Well, the dome's built for gameplay, right? It's built to be a game day facility. So you have the spacing on the sides. The difference is, and I never thought about this, but it's a good point you're making. When you go out on a guy, you do notice your surroundings. So you might be saying to yourself, I can't get that far out. I'm all the way out to the wall. Like I'm out to the edge of the bubble. Like you might think to yourself, like I must be going too far.
Right.
Maybe there's a part of that look, when we were playing indoor, for example, you knew where you were on the field based on looking at the boards.
Right, exactly.
And every place we played, the boards were essentially in the same place. I mean, the rink might be a little bit different.
I say that because when I'm watching these games that have been played in these, bubble, practice football facilities, I'm watching goals get scored, and I'm like, how come he's not out on that guy? Like, didn't he realize how close he is? And I'm thinking maybe that's a point of they are the dimensions.
No,
actually,
it's the depth perception. Your depth perception is off. Yeah,
I think there's something to be said for that. I do. I think you're probably right. All right, you guys were as smart as anybody I ever saw play. Did you look down to see the markings on the field to know where you are? Did you have to do that? Vin, did you ever look down and say, oh, wait, I'm at the restraining line?
Sense of where I was.
You mean on offense or defense? I mean, defense, I would always have a sense of where the restraining line was. That I always would want to have, and then if you played where there was like hash marks in football, that could give you an idea, maybe a little bit of that. But yes, the restraint on defense, definitely. Offense, I take as much as they give me. If they want to play off of me, I'm going to find a place where I can get open and get shots.
But I think those guys are probably a little spatially put off, and it might lead to guys not knowing where they were. It's a good point. It's another part that makes those games unreal. Takes away the credibility of those games.
And that's what's hard. It makes it different, is what I'm saying. And that goes to the scheduling and that. And they're gonna beat that horse to death in terms of the next few years. Obviously, it was just a bad year weather. Maybe next year there's no snow. Maybe it's 50 degrees in January, and everybody will be thrilled to be outside and playing. But I don't like the idea of playing competitive games in poor weather. And Syracuse doesn't have to worry about it. And, Duke, for the most part, doesn't have to worry about it. And certainly the team south and Florida and everywhere else, they don't have to worry about that. But other divisions, Division 2 and Division 3, they have to worry about it because they want to try to play their schedules. And I think it's just not a great game because the fans don't enjoy it. I watched, I want to talk about that game a little bit more too, but I watched the Albany Cornell game, and I guess the angle where they were taking the camera from, you saw nothing but white, the stands. Like there was not a person in the camera viewfinder. So unless there must have been a lot of people under the camera, but looking out that way, zero. Not even a person, not even a staff, not even an usher, a security guard, nothing. So, to me, that's like it was a great game and you got nobody watching it.
Well, think about it, right? So you're the administration. You have this game. You now have to get people to shovel all those stands. Yeah. This isn't Green Bay where you're going to get all the fans to come out and do it for free because they love the team so much, right? So my question is, why put it to chance? When was it they had the Super Bowl in New York? How long ago was that? That one time?
Yeah, that's like 8-10 years ago.
Right? They did it one time, and the reason they never would is because they just couldn't chance it. And they got lucky. Didn't have a really good day.
Yeah, they got real lucky because there was a blizzard right after the game.
Right. So you can't, why put it to chance? There's enough possibilities of something bad happening with rain and everything else that can happen weather-wise because you're an outdoor sport. But why would you put it to chance if you could avoid it? Now, the difficulty for all of us, to be honest, is we've seen some of our worst snow in March and April. But it goes away immediately. So any snow we get, it gets cleared, and then the next day it's 55 degrees, and it's fine. But look at what we're dealing with now. That snow that's on our fields will not be gone till April. Those mounds that you see around, every game you watch that's outdoors in the Northeast will have mounds of snow. You guys should pay attention to this on the podcast. When is the last one gone? And see when it is. I would tell you, unless we get significant warmth and rain, it's going to be like April 1st before you see the last of the snow, the remnants of it.
Yeah, it's probably going to be up at Cortland State. Shout out, Leland Rogers. That's our guy, Syracuse. But yeah, that's basically right. It's going to be somewhere up there that there'll be snow in June up there.
Yes. And
well, listen, it is what it is. You're going to have to play through it right now. The schedules are the schedules. We can't control the weather. But what you could try to control is how your team plays and, keep them with the right attitude. Keep them not worrying about that kind of stuff. But I wanted to get back to the game. I wanted to get back to the game and what I saw. We talked more defensively about what happened, but offensively, and we talked more on the Maryland side. The Syracuse side, what I noticed, I see a lot of, Gary influence. Obviously, he's the head coach, but these Syracuse kids, they scored a bunch of goals off picks. They're very good at coming off picks at the right angle. They're setting the picks in the right spots on the field. Anybody can say, set a pick for a guy, but they're not all equal, depending on where you're setting them. If you're putting a guy in a bind a lot of times, which they did to Maryland, they put guys in a bind, meaning, it was a big little pick. Let's say, Mitty had a shorty on him, and he goes to set a pick for Spallina. That guy with the short is saying, oh, God, if this Spallina comes off this, do I really want to switch? I'm going to end up on him. So there's that split second of confusion where he knows how to come off that and release a shot. And not only him, he does it really well. Mike Leo does it really well. There's a bunch of them that do that well. And then they took advantage of a speed dodger in that Hoddle, the little guy that scored a couple goals. They matched him up. He immediately inverted. He made that goal when he came from behind, and he put it in a very tight angle he put in, But looking at it from Maryland's point of view, you might live with some of that, but I just think that, if I was watching the tape of that and I'm, John Tillman and the defensive staff and all, I mean, to me, I have my own theory of how to play that, if I was coaching. I always believe in, if the best guy on the other team's coming off a pick, just double him, attack him. Which is what Syracuse kind of does. They do it on everybody. They just jump it. I want to see a team make a play under pressure. If they make a play under pressure,
how often do defenses go after guys anymore? They really don't. It's all system based. It's all, protect the middle of the field. So I agree with you, but going to the Syracuse side of it offensively, what did they do that was effective? They set the picks in shooting spots.
Right.
So now just that little pause gets the shooter's hands free. And now you got a shot that's pretty reasonable. It's going to be interesting to watch because we know how smart John is. We know how smart Gary is. They're going to just take this stuff and go to school on it.
Right.
So they'll play that much differently. And then Gary will have his adjustment knowing that John's going to play differently. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch for us as like students of this who love to watch the mental games. But this is when you bring up Hoddle, right? I think the Syracuse offense is so much faster than it's been, like in their ability to go by people. So we know Leo can do that, right? He's crafty. He's tough. I wouldn't even call him fast. He just knows that one dodge he had in the middle of the field, that wasn't about speed. That was about footwork and kind of will. Like he's getting there. He kind of makes his mind up and he's getting there. You know what I mean, Steve?
Yeah, totally.
That's just, I got the middle of the field here. I'm not going to be denied like that. He does that kind of stuff. He's crafty that way. And his feet move in a way that he's quick in a small space, but he's also tough. So, like, his grittiness is a big part of their offense. The kid Anderson is a factor because his size, and he moves pretty well, too. He's not one of these big guys who, he's lumbering. He moves pretty good. He's got good feet. And then the person that didn't do anything in this game, and I was curious if he was hurt or something's changed, but he's just having a tough shooting year, is the kid Roa. Because Roa, before you saw Hoddle going by people, one of the main guys from up top going by people was Roa. I just think he's got a good speed game. He shoots it beautifully on the run. He's shooting 2 for 10 on the year. So he's having a slow start. Now put him in the mix, Vin. If he starts picking it up, with what you're getting.
I mean, 10 shots in 3 games is not a lot of shots, too. I think he's got to get more opportunities. He needs to.
But then you add in McEntee, McCarthy. Yeah. This is what I love about the way they do things up there, and this is Gary. I give him a lot of credit. He's putting young guys on the field.
Yes.
So many guys are afraid to put young guys because they're not proven. So they say, like, well, where do you prove it? We know practice is important, right? And I'm sure they're playing their tails off in practice and they're doing a good job and it's earning them the playing time. But you still have, as a coach, have to have the confidence to throw McEntee, McCarthy, Hoddle out there and say, go do your thing and live with it. And most guys are afraid of that.
Yeah.
All these teams, all these great teams, have 5 more guys down the roster that can make a contribution. Just got to give them a chance.
Yeah, they got to get a chance. That's it.
And you don't know, look, you don't know what's going to happen injury wise or any other circumstance later down the road. So why not have a guy get some reps and play some meaningful minutes so that God forbid that one guy or two guys ahead of him go down. He's ready to play now. Like Gary's building a deep team.
Yeah.
Their roster top to bottom. But I wanted to, Vin, just on the pick conversation, because we watch so many games now, and it seems like these guys, it always inevitably seems like the pick screws the defensive guys up. And, in that game, it happened a few times, especially when a short stick is involved in it. And I always feel like you're ultra aggressive. Vinny's the ultra aggressive guy. He wants to full out go, blitz the guy, and that's a little bit of that from indoor. But even just from switching, I mean, if I'm a D-middy, and then I played, I wasn't a D-middy, but I played defense back in the day. We had to play defense. I wasn't afraid of ever, okay, I'm getting the switch, and I'm now going to have to guard this attackman. I don't care. I had to guard Gary Gate. Who's going to be more difficult to guard than him when you get on him sometimes? Begging for help. So, help, please. But why are they so afraid of just switching the matchup? And even if the matchup just gets switched, why isn't that just an automatic signal to the whole defense to be like, all right, now we need to even support more on this matchup? Why is it? I think they screw themselves up by trying to avoid the switch if it's not so clear. That's where they seem to get picked off, the defender, and then the offensive advantage is made.
Well, I think you have to find a medium, right? So where is it in the shot clock? If you got a lot of defense left to play, you might approach it differently than you do inside of 30 seconds. But, and this is a Vinny philosophy, Steven, so he won't even have to say it. I'll say it for him. Just turn the guy. Turn him once.
Yeah. Right, that's a hedge.
Yeah.
Just turn him once and know you're going to double it on the turn. If that's your defensive philosophy, turn the guy. So overplay his strong hand, bring him back the other way, and on the turn, you double him.
Right.
You do that a few times, guys aren't as willing anymore. And it changes everything. What they've done, what defenses have done, and this is your side, Steven, is they've played this scared of this big little stuff, right? And then they play into it. Like, oh my God, you got the matchup you wanted. Now we should be afraid. No, you got the matchup you wanted, and now we're going to play it differently. We're going to double, or whatever we're going to do, we're going to make you play faster. And that's where the mistakes happen.
I'm sure you've seen this. And again, I don't know why they do it this way. I'll give you one. It's like one of these little things that irks you, something that just bothers you. I find it so annoying when a short stick is guarding that pick guy and the offensive guy goes through. I hate this. When you just see the guy, he wails the guy as he goes past and then stays with his guy. You ever see that?
It's the same.
I feel like I'm like, first of all, it's annoying because you're just taking a free whack, but I don't even I think it actually screws up the guy guarding the ball because it actually makes the guy think like, is he going to switch and guard him? But then he stays with his guy and then the guy's like, oh crap, I got to go get on this guy now.
Well, it's a copycat thing.
But
right?
that's
So
why
everything
that's why I like attacking it, because it takes the guesswork out of it. If everybody knows that the game plan is we're attacking every time they do it, it takes guesswork out of it.
Exactly.
It's like, I thought you had room, you really didn't have room. I didn't know if I should switch because it was this guy compared to that guy. All of those things that factor in. Well, he was still behind the goal, so I didn't think we should. Just do it. Live with it, and at least the other four guys who are off the ball at that point, they adjust. They should be moving into lanes where, where maybe the next pass could go. You can make things so difficult on players, like just even like we talked before about how Maryland likes to bounce the ball around, So I remember years ago, and Dito, our good buddy, would tell you, where Hopkins used to play a defense where guys on ball and the two adjacents, they shut off. And what happens when they shut the two adjacents off? Some guy stands still and the guy's getting harassed, and he's running for his life. Some guy, they don't think, there should be an automatic thing. You're being shut off, you're the adjacent, you're cutting through. And we're replacing with the next guy. These are like, if you just do these things every day in practice and it becomes second nature to these players, I think they're going to be a lot more successful. I think you got to put players on, and as great as they are, I mean, the stick skills are off the charts. These kids are amazing, and their athletic ability is amazing. But I think that, you just have to do a better job in making it easier for them in terms of their decision making, because a lot of players are just not great decision makers. It's like you said before, Pat, you're talking about the field you're playing on. Knowing where you are on the field is important, and that's why it's important. I've always been lucky enough to play with great goalies who are talking, and if you listen for them, or even, guys, the adjacent guy to you who's a real player, like when I played with you many times, Pat, if you were adjacent to me and I just turned to you and I'm like, I'm going, Pat, and I knew that if I went and they were going to try to throw to my guy, it wasn't an easy play because you were already coming, anticipating, So as long as you don't screw up and let the guy get out, and it can happen, a guy could duck in between two guys, a guy could spin around. It's all about positioning yourself right and putting the guy in a vice. I mean, it sounds, I'm making it sound like it might be easy, but it's not all the time. But I'm just saying, I just like the percentages of it working compared to when guys have to make too many decisions. Because when guys have to make too many decisions, they screw up.
And now you need 6 guys to make good decisions.
Yeah.
And you made the point about the athletes, right? How many times in our career was the biggest, strongest, fastest guy the best decision maker?
Not that many.
Not often.
Can you name them, right? And this is going back to a philosophy I have with kids all the time, is give me the kid who was undersized his whole life, as you both were, because they learn how to play. And they learn how to survive. Bigger, stronger, faster is for so often bigger, stronger, faster their whole life. And the club model plays into this. Go hard to the goal, run by 3 guys, score. You draw attention, everybody likes you, you're a top recruit. This is where it goes back to depth. There might be some kid on that bench who's 5'9", 165 pounds, but is just a really good decision maker. He might not get that chance. I think the great coaches put those guys in the games. I think those are the guys who make those differences. And they recognize what their strengths are. All these teams have those guys. It's just, do you have the time to put them into that situation? But Vin, what you're saying, you have to, from a defensive point of view, put pressure on the ball. If there's pressure on the ball, the guy will have to make decisions faster than he'd like to, and that leads to mistakes. It may not be every time, but you'll see turnovers get ramped up. You'll see many more turnovers a game. You'll see a lot more transition for your defense. But go back to what we talked about, picks. Where you're setting them on the field is important, right? So you used to see Syracuse set a lot of those picks behind the goal for those big littles. They don't work there anymore because the defenders use the crease. They get through this spacing. You can get through that. So what do? They set them on the wings now. On the wings where right away your ball carrier is a triple threat. He's a shooter, he's a passer, he's a dodger. So that's what leads to what you're talking about, Steven, where now the guy hedges a little bit. He smacks him one time. Or maybe he gets the defender to think he's going to double it or he's going to switch, and then he doesn't, and then things get all screwed up.
Right.
It's the positioning on the field that leads to it because there's more immediate pressure on the goal. Whereas behind, even if the guy's making the run behind, you just know you trail him a little bit, push him upfield.
He's got to get to the front.
He's not going to, he's not going to be able to turn the corner, right? But where does that come from? That little slap or whatever that you refer to, Steve, that comes from basketball.
Yeah.
You watch guys run a pick and roll, and they run that pick, and the big guy who's switching, he runs with that point guard for 5 steps and then retreats back to the paint.
Right.
And then they switch the matchup again. So they don't lose the matchup. They don't get that switch. But he pushes that guard out far enough where he's not as much of a threat. And now the guard replaces and he runs back to the paint. Like it's all copycat stuff. But
That's
it's
true.
not easy. I agree with you, Vin. I think there has to be more pressure and make them play fast.
Here's the difference, though, Pat. In basketball, they still screw up those picks, and there's 35 points scored on these pick and rolls. Like in the NBA, you see them get all, and they're scoring buckets. In lacrosse, you why give up these goals? These to me are easy goals, and like Vinny says, it is about taking less options. Why have to think so much about it? I much rather always just secure the perimeter. If you have to switch, fine. If you feel it becomes a worse matchup for you, support it, just like you would support any other matchup.
But you're not.
I used to joke around and say with Long Island, we were better prepared to guard against guys like Casey Powell or Gary or Paul if they were being guarded by Joe Corello than if they were guarded by you. Because you were like, he's got it. And if you didn't have it, there was maybe a good opportunity for them. With Joe, we were like, okay, we definitely got to be ready for this one. So it's like, I always think defense from inside out, play the percentages. And as a defensive player in my mind, I don't care who's on the field. I'll guard them to the best I can guard them and hopefully get the help when I need it.
But you're
That's why
undervaluing the direct.
the guy on ball, if you're on the ball and you're going to get picked, obviously, the best place to be is try to get to the guy. You take away the guy's strong hand, overplay the strong hand, especially if you're, behind the goal, it's so much about the positioning that gives you an edge, but again, I just think that the less decisions defensive players have to make, the better. If you're just scripted to know that this is what we're doing on this is what, when a guy's over here, this is what we're doing. Because, listen, when guys set picks behind, you could always bail on it and just let the guy go stay behind and get hung up. Who cares? At least, all right, but at least you didn't give a guy come around and just put a ball in. You bail on it and just say, okay, wait a minute, I can't get to the guy and I might be hung up, but so what? I'll take my chances with that. Now you're really playing 6-on-5 in front of the cage with your advantage. The guy force the guy's hand. He's going to either drive left or right, or he's going to try to feed it. But I don't know. Defense, I think at the end of the day, I think it also, like you said before, Pat, too, I think playing that way also creates transition. And I think the more transition goals you could get in these games, you're in great shape. I'm stating the obvious, but there's ways to create the fast breaks, and it mostly happens from defense to offense. Years ago, you could check the ball out of a guy's stick easier, and so you created it like that. Now it's a little tougher. You're not seeing it as much because it's not so easy to dislodge the ball, But out of double teams, you definitely could take the ball away or break out from something if you anticipate. But it's so funny watching lacrosse through all these years. There are things that are mainstays. How you play against a pick, these kinds of things in every sport. Everything old is new again. Guys put a new wrinkle to it. But they can do it better and better because, like you look at an NBA in terms of that. Do you get around the pick? Do you stay under it? What do you do? Now you've got guys that are shooting from the locker room. You better go get on the guy. They're gonna light you up all day. The shooting is different. That's the difference in lacrosse. The further you're making them set it, and we were coached when we were playing indoor. All of us. A guy went to set a pick. You were pushing that guy who was setting the pick. You can do that too. Don't let the guy just run free to set a pick on your guy. Start moving him until the ref says, wait, take it easy. You can't do that. That's a part of the aggressive play you have to have, or pushing the guy away from, because some guys are lazy when they go, they're just going to set a pick. And if you're just standing with them, you're doing nothing. You should be communicating. You should be pushing them. There's a lot of things you could do to help yourself.
What about, the beneficiary of all of these things, and we haven't really spoken about him, but how about Joey Spallina and the game he put up in this particular game? Definitely quieted critics in terms of, we know his abilities and his IQ, but there was always this thing where he's not delivering it against he did it against the best defenders in D1, and what do you think?
I don't necessarily. I don't buy into that all the time. I don't think there's rarely what you would call one-on-one matchups, and for sure with Syracuse, you're not going to have a one-on-one matchup that often. I think that kid handled Joey fairly well when he didn't use a pick or anything. The guy had him pretty good. I'd give the edge to the defender on that. But Joey, guy, I was watching on Instagram, a thing popped up, a guy, I don't know the kid's name, unfortunately, but, he does like a analysis and he's showing the plays and he does a great job of analyzing it. And he was saying, look where Spallina starts from. Look where he's going. That's what Joey, his lacrosse IQ pays off. How he shifts his body, how he knows what angle he's going to shoot the ball, and that's why he's so dangerous in that picking situation, because he is a very good shooter. And, I think indoor has helped him a lot with that.
Definitely.
And I think that it's kind of moving down the rest of the team. I think him doing it, and I'm sure Gary's teaching it because, you're not going to get more expert than Gary at that. But, it's having an influence on everybody and how they're playing, and that's why they're having success.
I think his role's a little bit different. I think when you add that speed into the equation with the dodging, I think he's going to score more. I think he'll score a lot without carrying the ball. And I think when he does carry, they're not really letting it, other than those super speed guys, nobody's really just going by their guy on their own. It's always some kind of friction or some kind of setup. And again, where did they do it for him? They did it on that wing where he's most effective as a shooter. So what you're just being smart. All right, I got a guy who does this stuff really well, and this is where he scores. I'm going to get him free here. Now, again, this is the beauty of it. We'll watch this game in May, and they will do everything they can to take that away, Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So now it becomes that chess match. Like, what do you do next? Right. What do you do differently?
Well, that's what, look, this is where the lacrosse IQ comes in, and he's smart enough to have an effect on the game, whether it's passing or whether it's getting his shots or finding an open area. He's going to put his imprint on the game, but he's also fine with, if he's going to have a lower scoring game because the team is so focused on taking him out of it, and the little guy Hodel runs by guys and scores 3 goals, or middies are not being supportive and supported by the opposing defenses and they're scoring goals, they're happy with taking the win that way. It becomes the pick your poison situation. When he's smart enough, Spallina, to know how to get his spots, pick where he can be most successful, or where he can help his teammates facilitate their success, and they all come out with a win.
And this takes time. So what is this, Gary's 5th year, right? This is cultural. So you look at it from a coach's point of view. When those kids get there, that 22 class, right, that everyone talked about, they're trying to change things. They want to win. Right? They want to win. They always have won. All those kids were great players in the club scene, and all the things they did were great. But they learn quickly. They want to win, but college is different. But they started to make that shift. Year 2, they think they can win. Like, they think they can win those big games, your ACC schedule, all that. Year 3, they believe a little bit more. Right? They believe it. But you're still going into some of those big games. I think now they expect to win. I think they've built that now. and they're in a place where it doesn't matter what it takes or who is the one leading it that day. We're going to win. And if you want to take one guy away or two guys away, you just can't do it. There's too many of us, and we're all just way too bought into what we're trying to do that you're not gonna stop this. I just think that's where they are. I think they've changed everything there. I think Gary's leadership and John O'Derna and March and those guys, and there's probably two or three other guys on that staff that we don't even know them, but they're important to what those kids do every day, and they built something. Like, this is a foundation. When I got there in '88, the culture was not great the prior years. And I've told you this, two guys, Neil Alt and Bill Durgell, they decided as captains they were changing everything. And no one knew who we were. Like, no one, I mean, you guys knew who Gary and Paul was because you watched a little bit at the end of the prior year. But there was a cultural shift of, we're going to be good to each other. We're going to be great teammates. Team comes first always. And that was like what I walked into, was the perfect storm of talent and commitment and, you know, positive culture and all those other things you hear about all the time. That's what, as an alum, that's what you have to be most proud of in what this team's done. Because now they expect to win every time they take the field.
Is there a great bit of energy going on? Like, obviously, alumni, the group side text, group text, is there a good vibe of excitement about this team going forward?
Yeah, guys are excited. Look, there's other parts to it too. Like, you know, you got Timmy Mack's nephew on the team. Like, the Long Island guys are happy about that. You know, like there's a lot of different parts. Everyone loves Billy Dwan. I mean, he's a Blue Jay, but we forgive him for that. But his son is great to watch. His son is a guy who sticks up for everybody. He's got stuff in him in a nasty way that Billy didn't have. Like, Billy wasn't like that. Billy's just a nice person, and his son's got like the grittiness to him that you're like, all right, it came out, next generation. Like, there's a lot of parts to it that you're just excited for. You know, Leo Kidd being from Long Island makes the Long Island guys happy. But again, I think it's a cultural thing. Now, big picture, if you ask me, like, what does this team need? And this is going to sound crazy, but you'll understand it. They need to lose. They need to lose a game. Like, at some point, because they're going to roll through a lot of this.
And they're going to go through a gauntlet, though, too. You get to those ACC games.
You got to take all that belief and that expectation to win. And then at some point, I believe this all the time, there needs to be a reset. Like, how many teams you've been around where things are going really well and guys start to get a little full of themselves?
You know who it happened for, Pat? You know who it happened? Happened for Cornell last year. When they were winning the game, they gave away that game to Penn State up at Cornell, and that's the only game they lost the whole year.
As great as players are, as important as they are, coaches need like a time to take the team back, to kind of take control back a little bit and say, okay, listen, you're great, but let's reset this and get back with the program a little bit, because it's impossible. It's not a statement of selfishness or anything. You just kind of go through things, and when things are working, you lose sight of the mistakes you're making because you're getting away with them. And there'll be a moment during this season where I think it will be good for them to have that challenge and have to face adversity, because if you don't, it's tough. I mean, look, there's great teams that go undefeated. It happens. I think there's too many good teams today. I think it's very hard to march through a season undefeated with all the competition, especially if you're an ACC school and you have to play that schedule. So on top of their schedule, and you add in Cornell, you add in, you know, all these other great games. Yeah. And in addition to the fact that right now you're everybody's Super Bowl, you're getting everyone's best. So how do
let's talk about a couple other games and bring up a couple other teams while we have you. I want to ask you guys this. So Richmond played Virginia. Virginia, I guess, traveled to Richmond, and it was a tight game, and then Richmond pulled away from them at the end, you know, and pretty decisively. I believe Richmond is for real. I believe they could be a Final Four team this year, based on what I've seen there. What are your thoughts?
Well, look at them in the last few years. That's a team that's grown through it. They've gotten better, and they've had some meaningful wins. How deep did they go last year? They were a tournament team a year ago.
They lost in the quarters in a very, very tight game with Cornell. That
Yeah.
easily they could have won. You know, so they're looking to make that leapfrog to the Final Four. Again, I don't know where you stack Virginia. I still think Virginia's loaded with talent. They're a great team, and it was a battle, but Richmond pulled away from them. I think it ended up being a five-goal game.
I bet you if you go in those two locker rooms, right, the Richmond locker room and the Virginia locker room, you'll see two different sets of circumstances. I think Richmond, along the lines of what I said earlier, they've been building something.
Yeah.
And I think the Virginia situation is something where maybe there's an expectation and there is tons of talent, but sometimes it's not about talent. It's about, how do you look, the best teams we've ever been on, we were going to fight you on the field or off the field because we were together. Though I don't know how those teams are. I really don't know. But I do know that it's a pretty seismic thing throughout the state of Virginia when Richmond beats Virginia.
Well, and Richmond, to your point, Pat, Richmond's in like maybe year 3 or year 4 of that arc. Virginia, it might be at year 1 of the rebuild. They might be 2-3 years away. They hit a little bit of a bumpy road after winning all those championships. And now they're trying to make their way back. And I think
Problem
they do.
is, it's 2026. The kids leave.
Yeah, this is a new thing. You got to
Does
redo it
anybody
every year.
jump ship on that?
Right.
You probably had. There's probably one that already has.
Yeah, that's tough. What do you think, Van? What do you think about Richmond?
Well, a couple of things. Richmond, they have been moving in that direction, but I think he's one of the top coaches in the country. I think he's done a phenomenal job with that team. I think that, they proved it, at Hofstra in that quarterfinal last year against Cornell. I think most people going to that game thought Cornell might mop them up, but Cornell fought for their life. They did the best job on Curse that anybody did all year. And it was a 1-goal game. And if I was there watching, it was a very hot day. I just think their issue is a little bit depth. I don't think they have the depth of some of these other teams, so I think they ran out of gas, at Hofstra that day. If they had a couple of more guys at a couple positions, one play stands out to me. I think they were actually up a goal or tied at the time, and it was late in the game, and they turned Cornell over, and they were trying to clear, and Cornell was pressuring them on the clear. And I remember a Pole running to the box, and when I say running, I'm exaggerating because he was so tired. The kid played his heart out the whole day. He was so tired. He was going to the box, but he wasn't looking back, and he didn't realize his guy was in trouble, and he couldn't get the other guy on the field in time to be an outlet for that pass, and Cornell turned them over and scored a goal. And that was like late in the fourth quarter. It was a huge goal in the game where, maybe if they had a couple more guys and they were a little fresher, they win that game. I don't know. But they've been great. I mean, they're beating teams. I think they're an elite team at this point, and I think it's a lot due to that coach's knowledge, but also him instilling a belief now. I think they do. I watched them play. They played. They're not like, oh, we're Richmond. How are we going to play with these teams? No, they're like, we're Richmond. We're here to beat you. And I think they're I would maybe call them a dark horse to go all the way, but not that much of a dark horse. I could see that team going far.
I'd like to
So
see their roster and see because coming off last year, you don't know what you lost, and obviously they're still
Right.
a really good team based on beating Virginia because Virginia's having struggles, but they're really talented. The challenge for them is going
Yeah.
to be, can you keep it going. Like those kids who now are graduating this year, last year, those are the foundational pieces of this. Those guys are not easy to replace. And I think that the question becomes, as the lesson in that locker room and through the coaching staff, which you have to acknowledge is great, are they preparing that next group of kids? Do they have the depth? Can they repeat those recruiting classes and find those kids? So getting there, we know is always the most difficult, is always the difficult part. Staying there is much more difficult.
So let's talk about. I know we touched on the weather part of that game, but let's bring up the champs. The champs open up in Albany, and this game really went down to the wire, went back and forth. Cornell jumped ahead at the last minute, and our favorite ref, Matt Palem's son, he went wild, was going by people. I mean, he played a tremendous game. I watched it. I was like shocked. I'm like, look at this guy. He's like, he's dangerous. Like he was getting matchups, going by people. And Albany, I'm sure it's heartbreaking for them and our friend Scotty Marr, but they really played a really, really good game. They really played Cornell tough. Is this Albany, showing some good mettle, or is this are we getting a little worried about the defending champs and saying, well, we're going to have to really see how they'll be going forward?
For me, it takes you a little while to figure out who you are in the post-Cursed era. I think that's fair. Anytime you lose the great player. Now they've got a ton of good kids returning, but you still have to replace, don't forget, like anytime it got big, you turn to them and you give them the ball. So now who's next?
Right.
There's definitely candidates there, and they'll be fine. But early on, tough night in upstate New York. I don't read anything into it other than the fact that, Scott's a good coach, and he had his kids ready to play.
Yeah.
There's another game where, you're talking about it. It's a 1-goal game. I think it was tied when Cornell with the ball, little maybe more than a minute to go in the game, under 2 though for sure. They get a stop and they outlet a pass to a short stick near the midline, and the guy just, he took his eye off it, whether he was nervous, whatever happened. I felt terrible for the kid because I think he had one like that before too in the game that cost him a goal. And Cornell got the ball back and scored the go-ahead with that, and they were having problems with the face-off because Cascadden was pretty dominant at the X. So that, a simple play like that, an exchange, a pass, a 15-yard pass, a guy drops at the midline when you just got to stop. It's a crushing play. But Albany, they got some talent. And Matty's son, Jackson, I think he had 4 goals and an assist. I texted with Matt after. He said he's starting to get it.
Yeah.
So
It's always his answer.
I think
he's always got a very dry. Listen, you got to understand, Matty Palem is his father's son. So if you ever met Matt's father, Pete Palem, he was as dry as you could get. So Matt is not effusive in his praise of his son. So here's the joke that Matt's father told. I have to tell this now because it's one of my favorites. Matt Palem is a Jamesville DeWitt guy.
Right.
But his father was the football coach at West Genesee High School. So for 1 year, Matt transferred to play quarterback for his father. So he leaves Jamesville DeWitt and he goes to West Genesee High School. Jamesville DeWitt was a little more upper crust, a little fancier, and West Genesee was a little more of a working man's town and grinding thing. When he makes the transfer, Matty's father says to him, "You just raised the GPA at both schools."
That's great. That's great.
His father, both his parents, honestly, Matt's parents, I mean, I was up to visit Simi in the fall, and as I sat down to hang out with him and Roy Third and Ronnie, his son, they put a apple pie on the table, a Connie Palem apple pie that she delivers like every week to him. So like the Palem family, to see Matty's son have success, Don't expect him to rave about him. That's all I'll tell you. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
in him.
You know what's figuring it out? When you're running by people like he was running by them and shooting lasers, that's figuring it out.
Yeah.
When
And
he's
he's
gonna
been
open
that
that,
kind of kid. He's been that. He's just, he had to
yeah,
fill out a little bit. He had to grow into it. If you're Maddie, like, and the kid, you just got to sit there and say he's in the perfect place. Because if you're a parent and your kid's good, even if he's not, right? I have a dear friend whose son went to Albany for a year, just for a year, loved it, but it wasn't for him. He didn't want to play college lacrosse anymore. He left, he came home, he went to school. He got a text message. My friend and his son both got text messages like 2 weeks ago, just checking in, seeing how you guys are doing. Not even there anymore.
Yeah.
Not even there. Just reaching out, want to say hello, miss you guys, hope everything's good, hope to see you at a game. That's it. There's no one better.
no one better.
Yeah.
There's no one better. And I think his teams always have a chance because, again, culturally and all that stuff, being bought in, you cannot be on the outside on a Scott Martin because you won't fit.
Yeah, he's gonna. It's bound to, depending on the talent level of the guys he has. Somewhere along the lines he's gonna clip somebody. Somebody's gonna not be ready for it, and it's gonna come, and he can bite you. There's no question. If you have the Great Danes on your schedule, you better be prepared because you don't want to be that team, especially if you're one of the more elite teams that takes it lightly and then finds out you're on the wrong end of that score. He'll have them ready. They're playing. They played hard. They really played hard. It's probably one of those games where there is a pride factor because the schools, I guess, in the north there, and they brought it. That game definitely could have been a game they won. They had chances, but it's the little things. Sometimes it's you say no face-offs are the same, and no turnovers are always the same either. It's a costly turnover late in the game can come back to bite you. It bit them, but I'm sure
to be in that game at all, Steve. To be in
Yeah.
that game at all, winning 7 out of 24 faceoffs
right.
Yeah.
says a lot against the team that's really good offensively
Right.
and has a lot of options. Cornell's got options all over the place.
Yeah.
So the other game I want to ask you about is, and they had just lost a game. The Villanova did their classic. They beat Penn State and then they lose to St. Joe's. But Penn State goes and pretty much throttles Princeton at Princeton. Looks very, very good in doing so. So
It wasn't a surprise to me that they won the game, but how easily they won. I mean, they jumped on them. I think they had a 7-1 lead on them or something like that. They
Right.
jumped all over them. Maybe I'm confusing that with the Villanova game. That Villanova went down. Yeah, I think Villanova might have went down 7-1. But
Right.
no, Princeton. That game didn't seem close with Penn State either. That was a surprise to me because Princeton has a lot of guys returning, and they were highly touted. So they came to right the wrong they had from the week before Penn State.
right.
Yeah, that's what's going to make it an interesting season. These teams, it's like some of them are Jekyll and Hydes.
Well, who is Penn State? They beat Colgate 18-14.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that makes you wonder a little bit.
I think Colgate's stronger than you think.
Well, look, I don't know enough about them, right?
Yeah.
But if you look at it from the outside, you think, all right, Penn State shouldn't be an 18-14 game. Certainly, you don't think they're gonna. Not that they're gonna definitely beat Villanova, but you don't expect that kind of outcome or that kind of start, and then to go that way. But it's early. These teams are going to go through so many changes between now and April when kind of the decisions are made. Between injury and changes in depth and who knows what else. it's the challenge. It's a challenge for coaches. It's a challenge for kids to see how much they can mature over the course of a season. But I don't think anyone that we've discussed is going to look in May like they do now.
Yeah. Yeah, listen, you're right. I think a lot of teams will improve. You got to always hope you stay healthy. There's so many factors. It's a long season, and you got to play it. You're talking about young guys, a lot of guys who would, freshmen and sophomores who are looking to be contributors to step up for them. So, give them some time to hit the ground and get really up to full speed. But I think this is going to be, the one team, we don't seem to talk much about is like Ohio State. They lost their number one cover guy, first team All-American. So there you go. Right off the bat, you lose a guy like that takes a hit. I think they'll rally the troops, but that's a team because of who I see over the years, who he tends to recruit. Big, physical, strong team with a very good goalie, and they're not going to be an easy out for anybody.
But Vin,
They're going to be tough.
But Vin, how many times over the last years have we had the same conversation about that team, right? Ohio State is always in the early season conversation. And then something happens. I don't know if it's the Big Ten schedule. I don't know if it's the way they prepare and the way their year runs. Do they run out of gas? Like some guys approach this as a build. Some guys are ready to be their best in January or February. And then they kind of fade. I don't know. I don't know enough about that. But
Are we heading? The last thing I wanted to just talk about is, though, and generally feeds into these things with the conferences. You got the Big Ten, you got the ACC, and the Ivy League, who I think have clearly emerged themselves as the three strongest conferences. You can talk about who the best teams will be in those conferences, but overall strength, I think those teams are the strongest teams, and any of them can emerge. Are we getting to the haves and have-nots? Because you see some of the scores, depending on the schedules, when it's a lot of these games early seasons is out of conference, and you see from those three conferences bombing some other teams. Then you got the outliers. You got the Richmond. That's a very, very strong team. You have the Georgetown in the Big East, but are we starting to trend towards a couple of conferences just being much, much stronger and everybody else just playing catch-up?
I don't know if you'd say they're playing catch-up. I think those other conferences will have their days. They'll win games, where they'll just have that one great day and they'll beat one of those big teams. But I think overall, those big conferences, those deep conferences are throughout their season becoming much more prepared for the big games because they face extreme competition game in and game out, but they still have plenty of opportunity for success, so they can really start feeling good about themselves. But if you're not battle tested throughout the year, it's very hard. So if you're in a conference that we would say is a second tier conference, you can have a little bit of a run, but it's just hard to duplicate the preparation that those three big conferences have.
But you have to do it when you're that second tier. You have to do it with guys that are really good, but not that good.
Well,
because if they get too good, then they don't stay with you.
Well, the other side of it is that you have to do it. You might have that one year where you have them. You might have that one year where you have that senior class that stuck it out with you and they built your program and you're good. And then did you build behind that? Did you have enough success to bring the next classes in? Are you attractive enough? Or are you going to have that year where, okay, all our eggs are in this basket and now we're going to go back down the ladder for the next 5 years?
I feel like this is just my opinion. I'm sure, we can post about it and different things and people will get shots at it and debate it either way. I feel like if there's 75 teams in Division One, I feel like there are 35 to 40 teams that can never do it. There's no building because they're going to lose. Anybody that's decent ends up out the door, that is for real. If they're a freshman at some school in the Colonial Atlantic League, and they put up, 50 goals, that guy might be out the door the next year.
I could take that another level. They're adding teams that are leaving the Division Two level, and I can say this selfishly, like it's hurting Division Two, and it's doing nothing to help Division One lacrosse. There's schools you see now that were very good schools at the Division Two level that are now
Merrimack,
losing.
Lemoyne.
They're losing 17-1. Some of
Right.
these teams, and I don't know that it gets better than that. Like it'll get better because there's good coaches there, but they're never going to have the support and the following to compete with those teams playing games, and I just don't know how meaningful they are.
Right.
How do you get the next kid? And then again, if
What do
you
you
do
think?
get the next kid, and he has that great year, are you keeping him?
Yeah.
Are they becoming too strong, some of these teams, Vin? I mean, is it going to make it hard for any of these other teams to really compete with them? Not that that matters, because we do get great games no matter what, but it does seem like, to me, it just seems like there was maybe before some of these rule changes and the player swapping left and right, there was a little bit more parity starting to develop, and now it seems like it's shifting away from the parity to me.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that, look, I always look at it, the lacrosse world and college world. I mean, you're talking about some of the finest universities in the world, let alone in the United States, are playing lacrosse. You got the whole Ivy League, right? So, I mean, you got University of Virginia. These are Duke. These are all great academic schools. Notre Dame. I mean, the list goes on. And knowing that there's few and far between guys who are going to make a living playing lacrosse, although there's a little more opportunity, obviously, than when we came out, I mean, it's still a hustle and a grind, but there are guys who do make their living with lacrosse. But the real goal is, you come out of one of these universities, top level universities, to get a job, a real job where you could have a successful career and live a good life. Lacrosse is a launching pad for that, and I think the players that can take advantage of that should take advantage of that. So let's say a guy was a little academically, not up to getting into one of those bigger schools, or was under the radar as a player, and then he plays at one of these lower level schools and he puts up big numbers, and one of these other schools comes knocking on the door. Pretty tough for the kid not to make the move. That's a career move.
Right.
It's not a lacrosse move. It's a career move, So yeah, I think it makes it difficult for these schools to ever grow and get to that next step of being in a Final Four or even competing for a national championship. I mean, when you look at the
That's
history
where
of lacrosse, I mean,
that's where the schools like a Duke and Georgetown should always be there because they're going to get the
right,
mature 50-year kid who goes for the Duke or the Georgetown
right,
MBA, and they're not worried about recruiting a freshman to fill that role. They're bringing in a battle-tested guy who's mature, game tested, savvy, and just plug him in. And who wants to win? Like who wants to be a winner? So like
right.
that part of it never gets turned off now. The rich
Yeah,
get richer on that one for sure.
yeah.
Well, let's wrap it up by asking. We definitely got to ask Pat about the Panther women. Like, I know you're getting ready to get rolling. You're in Florida. What do we have on the horizon for the adult Phi Panthers women team?
We got a big one tonight. The Panthers of Florida Tech. It's our opening game, so we haven't scrimmaged. We haven't had any outside competition, so we're at a significant disadvantage that way. But I like this team. We got a bunch of great kids, talented group. We lost some poise and maturity to graduation, but we return a lot of really, kids who are excited about this and going to get a chance now. So
Mhm.
we hope we can do some good things.
And they're in college
Well,
and they're
last year,
enjoying
from
them.
what I remember, last year last year I didn't, I think you went to the finals last year, right?
Last 2 years, they didn't win either
Last two
one.
years. I mean, and that was a little, but I think last year's team was a little unexpected, wasn't it? I mean, I don't think you guys were touted to be that high.
Then last year we picked up a senior who played 4 years of field hockey, hadn't played lacrosse since high school, and was great for us. And we picked up a freshman soccer player who played her fall season with soccer and decided she wanted to come out and try and play lacrosse again. One was a Northport kid, one was a Ward Melville kid, and they both started every game for us last year. Hadn't played lacrosse in quite a while, and we came down to Florida, and we probably lost. We lost the first game at least by 12, and lost the second game. We were down 9-0, and we ended up losing the game. But we came down here. We looked lost, and just keep going. And before you know it, we won a lot of big games, and we got to the championship, and we lost. But it was one of the best years I've ever had coaching kids. One of the best years, one of the best growth years I've ever seen from a group of kids, and I'll take that team all day long.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's great.
All right, then we got some shout outs. We're gonna wrap it up. What do we got? We miss Smalley. You're gonna shout out him. We could all give him an extra shout out.
Yeah, he's out making money. He's doing his business. He's supplying. Listen, he's got to get these teams geared up. Most of these schools, if you need gear, Sports Depot Apparel, he's ready to help. He's got a lot of work on his hands, so he was too busy for us today. I give him an infomercial. But my shout out is going to go. My shout out's going to go to young Michael Ferrone of Cary High School in Penn State, who has in these first 3 games has done some scoring for Penn State. He had a hat trick in a game. And this is after overcoming a torn ACL. So it's great to see him back and doing well. He's one of the guys who used to come down to Alley Pond Park with us and practice with us on those early Saturday mornings. And, hopefully he can continue what he started in the beginning of this season.
I'll go next, Pat. On that note, I'm gonna go to both. This will be for Smalley too. I'm gonna go to the Leos. The Leos with the big win. I'm sure he's thrilled. Fish and Michael. They're living it up now after that big win. I'm sure they're excited for a great season. Michael had a great game, and I'm sure they're absolutely thrilled. And I definitely want to, be able to see them in person, watch them play in person. I'm sure there's a game that we're going to get to. I'd love to get up to the Dome. I know it's on the calendar. I think somebody was saying in April, one of the games, if it's like the pseudo
Georgetown. Let's get to the Georgetown game.
Yeah, that's the one you had mentioned. Yeah, that's the one we might have to make.
I think it's March 22nd.
On March 22nd. Okay, great. That's fantastic. But that was my shout out, the Leos. And hopefully we can make it up there to see them in March. Who's your shout out, Pat?
I'm going to keep it at Penn State with Vinny, and I'm going to do my shout out to John Jude Considine, who had a Sports Center top 10 goal in that game against Princeton. There's not a better lacrosse family than the Considines. John and Lori and all the girls, and John Jude and Cole and all of them, like they just keep going. And to see him, graduate from Hobart and go spend his 5th year at Penn State, all of our guys are rooting for him, and we want great things for him as always. So shout out to John Jude and the Considine family.
All right.
Great people.
Well, Patrick, thank you again. It's always great to talk Syracuse. It's always great to talk lacrosse with you. I'm sure we're going to have you a bunch more also. And for the fans out there, we're going to get this up so you can listen to it. Remember to follow, because if you follow, at least you'll get a notification when we pop these new episodes up there. Or also, follow the Instagram. You can listen on Apple, you can listen on Spotify, you can listen on YouTube. We get it up on all over, and hopefully you enjoy it. We have a lot of fun bringing it to you, and I'm going to sign us off with some. We'll be back.
Thanks for coming, Jack.
Thank you.